What are the facts? Again and again and again, what are the facts? Shun wishful thinking, ignore divine revelation, forget what the stars foretell. Avoid opinion, care not what the neighbours think, never mind the unguessable verdict of history. What are the facts, and to how many decimal places? You pilot always into an unknown future. Facts are your single clue. Get the facts.
Abortion, there's a cheery topic. But obviously it's in the news a lot lately, both due to the liberalisation of abortion laws in Ireland and the restriction of abortion laws in various conservative-leaning states in the United States, should we say. The more religious, the more primitive, the less civilised states of the Union, he said judgmentally. And plenty of people are going to talk to you about the facts and the minutiae of constitutional law and the science and the arguments for or against abortion. I will do that, but I'll do it quickly at the end because I've had these arguments ad infinitum, and also I'm more interested in the kind of culture clash and the social warfare and the kind of meta-level narrative behind all this. And like a lot of people, I don't think I or many of them really considered Trump to genuinely be a threat to women's rights at all. In fact, when it comes to gender clashes, his administration's actually done some things that I must begrudgingly accept are fairly good, such as making sure that Title IX is even-handed, protections for the rights of the accused, and so on. So in some ways, some balance has been returned to the force, albeit by a Darth Vader figure, so to speak. But in stacking the Supreme Court and making it much more conservative by blocking Obama from appointing a Supreme Court justice on his way out and allowing Trump to appoint one, there's been a shift to the right, to conservatism, to this evangelical right-wing side of things within the Supreme Court, a body that is supposed to be apolitical and strictly supposed to examine constitutional law. And it's as a result of that, rather than Trump necessarily directly, that we see these challenges to Roe v Wade, because that's what this is all about, making these constrictions and so on, which is going to horribly inconvenience and destroy the lives of a lot of people. It's not actually about the state level or all the actual laws that they're bringing in. It's all to set the stage for a challenge on the Roe v Wade ruling. So the idea is that this will be challenged and it will go all the way to the Supreme Court. The right wing hopes it will be overturned there. Now, I don't think it's a particularly good ruling, though I'm not a lawyer and I'm not American. I think it could have been a huge lot better as a ruling, while being in favour of abortion. And I think there needs to be some kind of societal confrontation over this issue to get it settled, because at the moment it's kind of a halfway house. Many states put in so many nitpicking restrictions and so on that they might as well have bans. But it's going even further, to the point where if you go out of state to have an abortion in some states and then you return to your home state, you could be prosecuted for murder or manslaughter or some new definition that they've created. The whole thing is a huge fucking mess. So it probably does need to be settled, but this is not an atmosphere in which you're going to get a neutral, purely judicial ruling. But that's what it's for, and that's how people need to approach and consider it, however much that might cause problems for people in the short term. One thing that's been very interesting in all this is the gender politics around it. And for all Trump himself was supposed to be a disaster for gender politics, I think begrudgingly I have to admit that he's done some good things, such as securing the rights of the accused a bit more, softening Title IX in US universities, and so on. I mean, his motivations might be terrible, and they're certainly given that spin by everyone, but it's nice to see a little more gender parity in these issues. Now, reproductive rights are seen as a women's issue, and for many, many years any man who has shown any interest whatsoever in the issue, whether for or against, has pretty much been told to shut up and that this is a woman's problem. Now that those rights are under threat, however, we see this big call to arms to men to join in with the protests, to help out. And we also see men taking a lot of the blame when there are, in fact, plenty of women who are anti-abortion, and they're amongst the ones signing these things into law. Now, I don't consider myself to be a men's rights activist. I consider myself to be a human rights activist. I want everyone to have the same rights in so much as is essentially possible. And I do think that the men's rights, when it comes to this, do get ignored. Now, there's no doubt, and I'm not arguing, that the biggest concern has to be for the woman. It's her body, so therefore it's her choice. And the science should be what determines whether we restrict or constrict abortion past a certain point or whatever else. But it always takes two to tango. You can't just spontaneously have a baby by yourself. A man is going to be involved, and to whatever extent that we can, I think we do need to consider the man's rights. They should just not be allowed to override the woman. Does he want to be a father? Does he not want to be a father? Is it fair that a woman can abort or give up a child for adoption or whatever else it might be, whereas the man gets absolutely no choice whatsoever? Now, biology gets in the way, but if a man never wanted a child, if it's an accidental pregnancy or whatever else, and the woman doesn't want to get an abortion, is it fair for the man to become an indentured servant for 18 plus years to pay for the care and education of a child that he never wanted? So the idea of a sort of legal paternal surrender would give men reproductive rights. Because, and I know this is an unpopular and controversial opinion, but at the moment, men have no reproductive rights whatsoever. So when women are given a right to an abortion, that is a reproductive right, something that men don't have. This is a place of inequality in our society and unfairness. Well, we can't do much to redress that, but giving a man the option of legal paternal surrender would be a start. But you don't get to pick and choose as and when a man can speak up on this issue, because he has an investment in a child or children or whatever else. To a similar extent to the mother, it's his genes, it's his progeny. It just shouldn't be allowed to ride roughshod over the woman's rights. So we have to consider that, and I think that means that men do get to have a say, whether for or against, just the same as anyone else. It's just that it needs to be skewed more towards the woman's point of view and the woman's prerogative and the woman's rights than the man's. So I don't think it has been healthy, and I don't think it's been helpful to try and exclude men completely from the conversation. Another aspect of this which I found disappointing, as I say, I don't consider myself a men's rights activist, but I know quite a few of them. Most of them are very good people. But I've noticed in the tone and tenor of discussion around this as time has gone on, there's almost a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy going on, with men's human rights activists being demonized so much constantly in the media as being conservative, woman-hating, misogynistic, want to control women, all of that jazz, right? It's gotten to the point where those are the kind of people that seek out that movement and try to join it. I've seen an uptick in the number of traditionalist, hyper-conservative opinions being expressed in these men's spaces. And that's worrying, because the men's human rights people that I knew back in the day were, all things considered, pretty liberal and left-wing. They just wanted to make sure that it's equal rights that were extended to both genders. So that's been eye-opening and disappointing and unsettling to see. Of course, on the flip side of that, you have the, broadly speaking, feminist side of the argument, which does seem to be that men shouldn't get a say, men shouldn't be involved, men shouldn't even express their opinion on this. But now they are asking men to do that to back them and their reproductive rights, while men still don't have any. I mean, we should. It's the right thing to do. We should speak out. It's part of what I'm doing in this video. But what I'm also trying to do is get people to understand, and I want the feminists out there, the pro-abortion activists, to understand why perhaps they're not necessarily getting the kind of backing and support and attention from men that they might otherwise have gotten. A lot of men seem to just be kind of shrugging their shoulders. It's a woman's issue and going off and doing their own thing. And that's because they've been told it's nothing to do with them for so long. They've been told to butt out of these conversations. They've been treated with hostility. So you don't get the backup that you want when you've treated people in that way. Can we not campaign for reproductive rights for everyone together? Like the circumcision issue, I don't understand why there isn't a kind of cross-gender alliance. Mutilating the genitals of children is wrong. Why would it depend which sex the child is for that to be wrong? People should have reproductive rights. They should have some sort of say, one way or the other, limited by biology, over their child that has half their genes. Then that should apply to both men and women, right? Shouldn't that extend? Shouldn't the idea of reproductive rights extend to both? It seems like such a no-brainer, and yet it's a controversial and difficult position. Alright then, as quickly as possible, I guess. Abortion itself, what would be my position on it? My position is to follow the science, and if the science changes, then fair enough. I'm unaware of the science having changed since I wrote an article on this on my blog, atheist.wordpress.com, about abortion. So, what are the facts? Well, the scientific consensus, at least at the time I wrote the original article, was that a fetus cannot even potentially feel pain until after the 24th week. Now, keep in mind that the vast and overwhelming majority of non-medical abortions take place prior to the 13th week. Now, that doesn't mean that the fetus can't react to stimuli. That's an automatic response. It doesn't require you to be able to feel pain for a reflex to happen. It's like running an electric charge through a severed frog's leg. It'll twitch, but it doesn't mean anything. Consciousness requires the operation of particular parts of the brain in sync. So without activity in those areas of the brain, there is no consciousness, there is no you. There's no awareness, alertness, no sense of self, and nothing that we would consider human. Now, this starts to stutter into life around 20 weeks as a fairly conservative idea, but at that stage, the activity in the brain is intermittent. So it only becomes really synchronous and ongoing from about 27 weeks. So the best evidence we have is that this is the period of transition from just being a lump of insensate flesh to a human being with at least the full potential to understand their surroundings and the existence of self. You know, emphasis on the being, human being. I don't know what the laws are in the States exactly, but here in the UK, elective abortion is, or at least was, allowed up until 24 weeks. So this is before consciousness really starts up. Medical reasons are allowed later, and I think that only makes sense. You know, to save the life of the mother is more important. I don't think you can really argue this, that it's more important to save the fully actualized, living, conscious human being with relationships and a life and experiences and everything else, rather than something that is only a potential human being. So if she's at risk, I think she has to come first. In the UK, 91% of abortions take place at 13 weeks or prior. Now, there is no even potential for consciousness to be lost at that point, for a human being to be lost. Of the total abortions, at least when I looked up these stats, 47% of the abortions in the UK were for medical reasons. 1% were due to abnormalities, failed fetal development, that sort of thing. We do have to consider that abortion can cause distress. There was a recent high-profile case, just as all this was going off, of a woman who committed suicide after her abortion. She was American. But we don't see the same levels of stress and emotional turmoil in women who have abortions in societies that are more accepting of abortion. It's more of a problem in societies that really look down on it and punish the women socially for having abortions. So to argue that is a reason to ban abortion is perverse. If you want women to be less anguished, stop being so judgmental. That's the lesson from that. Unwanted children are a problem for society. Children who are given up, raised in care, fostered, and so on, are more likely to enter into criminality, to have social and societal and mental issues and so on. So forcing people to have a large number of unwanted children is a broader societal issue that affects us all in terms of our taxation, our provision of public services, the levels of criminality and so on. There's a steep decline in criminality after abortion was properly legalized in the US, and this is probably somewhat down to the reduced birth rate and the lesser number of children in the system, or who felt unwanted, who were resented by their parents, and so on. Contraception fails, and the urge to fuck is a very strong and primal one, so we can't just rely on contraception, or on people not having sex. Unwanted pregnancies can further impact a woman's academic or professional career, which impacts equality. And all of this does impact men as well. If they have a child that they don't want, it affects everyone. So everyone should have reproductive rights, both men and women. And there is nothing that could be considered human until consciousness starts up. This is going to go on longer than I intended, but believe me, this is the Cliff Notes version. Saying there's a heartbeat doesn't make any sense, because we can create twitching heart muscle on a slide from a bioprinter in a laboratory. Is that alive? The cells are alive, but is it human? Does it matter? Is it an ethical issue to switch it off and let those muscle cells die? No. So that something is alive in the most basic sense, this can't be a reason to stop abortion. That it has different genes to the parent can't mean anything. Doesn't mean it's a separate being yet, just a separate piece of flesh. There are people with absorbed conjoined twins. Is it wrong to surgically remove those? No. Cancer tumours are tumours because there's a genetic mutation that makes them different to the host body. Does it make sense to ban removing tumours? No. So just because it's different genetic material, that's no reason. And it's only a potential human. So you can't value it on what it might be, you can only value it on what it is. And a woman who has an abortion can always come back and have a child later on, unless there's severe medical complications. If you come into my garden and cut down one of my trees, do I get to sue you for the value of the tree, which isn't going to be very much, or the potential value if it had been made into a set of Louis XVI Baroque chairs? No, it's a tree, it's not yet furniture, so I don't get to sue you for its potential for being furniture. This doesn't make sense as an argument. The only thing that makes sense, the only breakpoint that makes sense, is consciousness. And we're not going to get anything like consciousness until very late in the pregnancy, well past the time when most of them take place. So that is the only condition upon which I think we can say that there is any kind of ethical problem with abortion, and past that point there are still good medical reasons, including mental health reasons, why we should allow abortion. Perhaps we should include a requirement for painkillers for the fetus past a certain degree of development, to where the pain centers are fully wired up. I think after 24 weeks, that would be humane, just in the same way we demand the humane slaughter of animals. That would make sense. And restricting non-medical abortions to only being allowed to take place prior to 24 weeks or so, that would make sense. So we should argue for reproductive rights. There are no arguments against abortion that make sense. Most of them come from a religious aspect, and you do not get to impose your religious viewpoint on anybody else. And it's not like all religions agree on this. Government has to be secular. You can't have a theocracy, and so you do not get to impose your supposed Christian values on others, which are at odds with Judaism, from which it originates in any case. Look up Jewish teachings on this, and you'll find they're a lot more liberal than you might expect. But that's beside the point, other than that you don't get to impose your religion on other religions that don't agree with you. As to the secular arguments, I don't think there are any. You might have a sense of disgust, but we should always strive to be dispassionate on these issues. That goes for both sides, really. What are the facts? What are the facts? That's all that matters. What are the facts? And make your decision based on those. Zang.